Morning everyone, Lieutenant Commander Blake. I'll be giving you your OPSEC brief for today. So a big thing I want to go over is first red bullet, the CIL list, critical information list. Each command has one of those. We'll go over at the very end. Those are the piece of information at 61 specifically that we do not want you to try and talk about out in town. References, you can refer back to the PowerPoint if you ever want to actually go look them up. Agenda, we're going to go through all this stuff. I'll try and make it as quick and painless as possible. So OPSEC goes back to the Vietnam War days. Essentially, the North Vietnamese got really good at figuring out where U.S. forces were, where they were going when operations were starting, to the point that the U.S. thought they had spies in the actual military. After a very big deep dive by the Army, they figured out there were no spies, but the North Vietnamese just had people out in town listening to casual conversations between soldiers. They then reported up what they heard. The North Vietnamese aggregated all that information, and then they could figure out where and when units were moving, what supplies were going where, which meant what kind of operations were about to go down. So from that, operational security came about, where essentially we don't want to talk about work outside of work. And if we're going to talk about it, be vague of what you're talking about, where you're going, when you're going, things like that. Moving on. So operational aspects, different pieces that the foreign adversaries can put together to try and understand our presence, capabilities, strengths, intents, readiness, et cetera, et cetera. So critical information. So these are specific facts about friendly intentions, capabilities, and activities needed by adversaries for them to plan and act effectively against our operations. As I just talked about, knowing when we're going, where we're going, and also what the capabilities of certain aircraft are. I understand we're in a C-40, it's Boeing 737, not super secret stuff. So a lot of these things we don't deal with the secret realm a lot here, but there's still aspects of our duration, how far we can go, when we're going, that kind of stuff that they could use to understand our logistics footprint for the U.S. military. So indicators, these are what the adversaries look for that kind of tell them something's changing. So longer working hours or just a change in working hours, rehearsals, procedures, changes, troop onload, offloads, and also uniforms and patches worn by the folks to know which units are coming and going. Threats, so an adversary must have intent and capability to undertake any action detrimental to the success of our activities or operations. Common collection methods, essentially they can, person out in town that you don't really know, just finding out you're in the military, just asking about your job, what you do. It could be an innocent conversation, or they could be trying to slowly dig and get to know what unit you are and what your capabilities are. Another one is obviously social media too. I know in the last brief we talked about making sure you're only friends with people you actually know online, but also being careful about what you put out online, as that information can get aggregated by adversaries, and then they can paint a better picture of what capabilities and limitations we have. There's other ways of gathering intelligence, such as signals intelligence, geospatial intelligence, and then measure and signature intelligence. I imagine that probably doesn't apply to us as much, but to other more super secret platforms, adversaries will use those collection methods to figure out what their capabilities are. So what are they looking for? Essentially, present and future sensitive operations. So the times of operational events, participating units and projected locations, and then information about facilities, such as what's on the base, where are the secret rooms, what kind of information do these buildings or personnel handle that they could then try and exploit and find out more stuff about. So vulnerability is a weakness. I think that's relatively straightforward. Any questions on what a vulnerability is? Cool. Common vulnerability is just lack of awareness, wanting to talk about work, the social engineering aspect. Someone tells you about their work, you maybe feel a social obligation to talk about your work. Additionally, online, I know a common one is putting out intentionally incorrect information, so that someone then corrects them to put out the actual information they're looking for. There's a few well-known examples of secret stuff getting onto Reddit or other forums where people intentionally put out the wrong answer so that someone would come back and correct them with the right answer that was sensitive information. Geolocation devices, as talked about in the cybersecurity stuff, your cameras, your smartwatches, all that stuff, it collects a lot of data. And even if you try and adjust the settings of turning off your geolocations, tagging, things like that, it can still be in the phone. This is a big one for pictures of, where you take a picture. There's a lot of data saved in that picture that people can figure out where you took it, when you took it, and a lot more stuff. I think it was a couple of years ago, Israel took out a top Iranian commander in charge of one of their nuclear programs because he posted a picture online. They were able to get enough data to figure out where he was, and then based on certain other things, they could figure out which building he was in, and then they went and tracked him. So, and it was an innocent picture, like just a guy standing there, like you wouldn't be able to figure out what's going on, and they somehow figured it out and said, okay, kill him. So that stuff does happen out there. So just be careful with foreign adversaries looking at your pictures you might post on Facebook or Instagram. Yeah, apps, gonna move on. Social media, I've kind of hit that one again. Be careful what information you put out on social media. It's a very big social engineering platform now for foreign adversaries to try and get to know you, follow you, and then exploit you for information they're seeking. Going over the do's and don'ts. Utilize appropriate privacy settings. Make sure you know who you're actually talking to, who's following you, and who you're following. Also, your family's security settings. Trying to keep them secure as well, because again, adversaries might go after them to kind of exploit them to find out information about you. So please, make sure your family's adhering to good social media practices and only talking to people they actually know online. Don't depend on default security settings. Don't trust add-ons or applications. Again, who actually reads the terms and conditions of those things? Yeah, no one. So you never know what they're actually collecting on you. So be very careful what third-party applications you're putting both on your phone, on your computer, tablet, whatever. Don't discuss personal information, work details, or answer questions for strangers. Don't take the bait by correcting others' posts of incorrect information. Again, I've talked about that's a pretty big one people like to do because everyone loves to prove that someone else is wrong, but they do it intentionally so that you put out what they really want to know. Please do not check into places. Again, that's that geotagging information that adversaries can use to find out where you are and patterns of life and things like that. And then don't think that you have the right to privacy on the internet. Once stuff's on the internet, it's out there. You can't really fully protect yourself from the internet and social media. So please be very careful on it. All right, risk is the probability that adversary will gain knowledge of our critical information and the impact it will have on our operations if they successfully use that information against us. So essentially, knowing where we are, when we are, where we're going, what time we're going, it can cause a loss of lives, mission failure, loss of money, time, loss of assets. So there's all kinds of different issues it could cause for the U.S. military and us as people. Countermeasures, essentially that's what we do to try and prevent them from getting the information. I would say the biggest countermeasure is not talking about work outside of work. So don't talk about work outside of work. And then just also be aware that people might be asking you what seem like innocent questions, but they might have ulterior motives for these innocent questions they're asking you. All right, essentially we do a periodic assessments to make sure that we are actually not putting out information in the OPSEC realm. Fun fact, turns out we passed our OPSEC inspection by the wing last year because we also failed the PAO inspection because we weren't putting out anything. So that's great. I say that's great. Someone else's program failed, but not mine. So great job, everybody. Moving on. So CUI, I think we all have kind of become familiar with this term. So it's unclassified information, but again, if the adversary can aggregate all this unclassified information, they can paint the picture of potentially classified capabilities, limitations, movements of troops, things like that. So while it is unclassified, please just be discreet when you are talking about that. Even if you're talking with someone else in the squadron out in town, remember, someone else might be listening to you that's not part of that conversation. So try not to go into too many details, use any kind of specifics, even if that person, you're right, has the right to know, doesn't mean you need to discuss it out in town when other people could be listening. Publicly available information kind of falls in the PAO realm. I know the wing likes to have us put out pictures of maintenance doing work, aircraft getting loaded, unloaded. Just if you are taking those pictures, please be mindful of what's in the background, what those people are you putting the people's name tags on there so that someone can figure out their name and where they are from, things like that. So all kind of pictures put out for the squadron should run through the PAO so they can screen and make sure we're not putting out information we do not want to put out. So just be careful. Other side notes, don't be like an unfortunate comrade of ours who took pictures on the flight line, then had base security called on them. You are not allowed to take pictures on the flight line without base PAO permission. So please be very careful about taking pictures on the flight line. / don't do it. All right, did I miss? Okay, I guess the slide got taken out of there real quick. Critical information for the squadron. That's going to be essentially any kind of ACARS information, the aircraft's location, future planned location, crew names of who's going on what missions, who the mission is supporting, so what units are actually being moved here and there, as well as how much in terms of personnel, cargo, how much you're actually moving. So please do not talk about that kind of stuff outside of work if you can avoid it. If you're having to talk on the phone to someone else in the squadron, please just go to a more discreet location so you're not just out in the middle of Walmart letting everyone know where 834 is going or when it's going to be fixed or things like that. Another one is the maintenance status or limitations of the aircraft at the time. Please do not discuss those out in public, okay? Cool. If no questions, that is your OPSEC brief for the day, and thank you very much for coming.
Good question.
All right.
Good question. I might have missed it. If we want to go to Whistler or Victoria, pretty close in Canada, what do we need to do?
That's not an OPSEC round, that's an AT round. Yeah.